Then I should share my screen.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Thank
All
you.
right. Shall I take it away?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Julieanne Kost, and I work for Adobe. And today we're going to be talking about the new features in Lightroom Classic as well as Photoshop. So we have maybe a little over an hour for me to get through as much content as I can, as well as answer some questions. So I'll go ahead and just dive right in. So you should be able to see my screen. I'm going to start in Lightroom Classic, but even if you're not a Lightroom Classic user, maybe you're using the other version of Lightroom that also has a desktop app, but where you store all your images in the cloud. Everything that I talk about today is going to be relevant to that as well. Or you might be using the Adobe Bridge to Camera Raw to Photoshop workflow, in which case, again, everything is going to be relevant as far as the masking goes, because the masking is the same in Lightroom Classic as it is in Adobe Camera Raw. Okay, so I'm just going to try to move one thing. Do I need to have people enter, or are you taking care of that?
No, they can enter questions in the chat.
Right, but do I need to let people in the meeting? Because it says 2 people entered the waiting room.
Yes, please.
Okay, although I don't know how exactly to do that, I'll just, oh, there we go, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. All right, so let's go over to the develop module. So I'll tap the D key, and that should get us over to the develop module. So I want to start, go ahead and keep admitting people. Okay, let me go ahead and start here. I'm going to hide the left-hand panel just for a moment, and I'm going to go into the masking panel. So when I tap masking, or when I use the keyboard shortcut Shift plus W, or I can use any of these other shortcuts. So even if I'm like in the grid view, I can just tap the K key, and that will take me directly to this window right here and make a new mask, a new brush mask, or I could tap M and that would give me the linear gradient. So whichever way you want to get here is fine. You'll notice at the top, there's 3 kind of bigger buttons. They're bigger because they're kind of these one-click buttons where we're using either artificial intelligence and machine learning to help create the selection so that you don't have to sit there and draw the selection. So select subject, sky, background, also objects, and also people. Those are all AI ML masking. Of course, we still have all the other masking. So you have your brush, your linear gradient, your radial gradient, and also all of the range masking. So if you're just trying to select, say, a range of colors or a range of luminosity values or a depth range, you can use any of these. Now, the depth range only works if you are actually, if you have an image like an HEIC file that you've photographed using your phone, your camera phone, and it's on an iPhone and you're in portrait mode, because that's what's going to capture that depth map. And then we can actually make a mask based on that depth map. But it's going to be grayed out unless you're working with a file like that. Okay, so let's say in this image, I want to start by selecting the pairs. So I'm just going to click select subject, and Lightroom Classic is going to select those pairs for me. Now you can see there's a red overlay, we get the masking panel, and we get a bunch of different options over here on the right-hand side. And you might be thinking, Julieanne, why does my masking options look different from yours? So on Monday, we actually ran a little update. So it's, I believe, goodness, is it 15.1, I believe? No, it's 12.1 for Lightroom Classic, 15.1 for Adobe Camera Raw. And what we did is we actually segmented all of the adjustments. So you might be wondering, like, wow, why did you reorder them? Why did you segment them? Well, in October, we actually released Tone Curve in Camera Raw as a local or a selective adjustment. And so there's, and I imagine in the future that perhaps would be added to Lightroom Classic, as well as some additional options. So by segmenting this, we kind of enable you to toggle the ones that you're maybe not using so that you're only going to be seeing the ones that you are. And in fact, you can right click and go into solo mode now in the local adjustments, just like you could in the regular panel. So if I go into solo mode, when I click, for example, on the color panel, if I want to adjust color, you'll notice that the tone panel automatically closed. If I wanted to, say, do noise reduction or sharpening, I could go into the detail panel and the color panel would close. So it just auto opens and closes the other segments within your local adjustments so that you don't have to scroll as much. And if you don't like that, that's fine. You can just turn that off and then you can just use the disclosure triangle and you can see all of them and just quickly scroll in between them. Okay, so we can see that we've got the red overlay, we've got the mask panel. We can reposition that anywhere we want. We can, in fact, dock it at the top of our adjustments if you want to. And one of the features that I really like that they just put in on Monday is this ability to toggle off the auto hide masking panel. So if I toggle it on, which it's on by default, every time I move one of these sliders, you can see that the masking panel like flashes, right? Like, so we auto hide it. Same if I were to come in here and add a brush. So if I'm doing some dodging and burning, to me, that is super distracting that the panel keeps hiding and showing. So I prefer this option now to disable the auto hide masking panel. So look, now I can sit here and paint and paint and paint, and it's not going to toggle. Well, it just did, but it shouldn't be toggling on and off. Let's see. Yeah, no, it's not toggling. I don't know. That was a little glitch there. Okay, so that's one of the things that I like to do. Let's go ahead and delete that mask. We don't need it. And we can return to mask one, which is this select subject. So once you move any of these sliders, you no longer see the overlay, but you can always just tap the O key and that would show you the overlay again. So it just toggles on this overlay here. And there's tons of different options. If you click on the little swatch here, you can change the color for the overlay. You can change the opacity for the overlay. You can flip it. So instead of seeing the affected, you see the unaffected area if you want to. You can also view your mask in all of these different options. And this one I really like, this white on black. I always use this when I'm checking my mask because a lot of times with the color overlay, I can't quite tell where the edge of the mask is. Like I probably would have missed the fact that it's missing a little area right here or maybe right here, just because the red is a little subtle and sometimes it's hard to see, especially if there's a lot of red in your image, which is of course why we let you change the color. So I do often toggle to this white on black. Now I don't have to come into this window to do that. I can also just use the more icon, which is the three ellipses here, and I can choose white on black and that will toggle it for me. Okay, so for right now, I'll go ahead and leave it to red, but we can go in and we can adjust. Well, we can't adjust the mask that's automatically made, but we can go in and we can either add, subtract, or if we hold down the option key, we can intersect whatever it is we do with the next component of our mask. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have this select subject and it is a single component. But what I love about this, which I wish was in Photoshop, is that I can make multiple components that create a unified mask. So for this one, because it would be such a small change, I'm just going to go ahead and just make the change. I'm going to tap the O key to hide the overlay, and then we'll just move the temperature. Okay, so I'm just going to make the pairs yellow, all right? But let's say now I just want to affect the middle pair, right? So I like what I've done to all the pairs, but now I want to create another mask. So let's also name this all pairs. All right, so that's all the pairs. Now I'm going to create a second mask and we're going to make multiple components with this mask. So I'm going to start with the object selection. The object selection, again, AI or ML, so it's going to make the mask for me. But there's two modes. I can either scribble over an object, or I prefer the second mode, which is just to draw a rectangle because it's super easy, right? I draw a rectangle around the pair, and basically Photoshop is shrink wrapping the selection so that it's affecting the pair. Now, did I switch this so that it's showing? Yes, I did. So I want it to show the affected area. So now it's going to show that pair that I selected. All right, but we can see that it's selecting a little bit too much, right? So let's make our adjustment. So I'm going to, for right now, let's change the hue. Okay, now changing the hue with the slider, it moves rather quickly. So you can always hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows, And then when you drag, it goes to this fine adjustment mode. So it takes a little bit more mouse movement to move a smaller amount of the hue. So I can do the fine tuning that I want to. So let's say I like this color, but it's affecting the stem, and I really only want the kind of warmer color in kind of this top area of the pear. So right now we have this is the center pear, right? And it has one component, the object. And if we roll over this, we can see the mask. If we roll over the little thumbnail, and we can see that both masks are the same right now. But as soon as I say that I want to subtract an area and I want to use the brush tool, then we can go ahead and zoom in and let's look at our settings. So I want kind of a little bit of a feather here, and I want the flow all the way up to 100% because I want to subtract this whole area. So I'll use the right bracket to get a little bit larger of a brush. And when I paint, I'm subtracting that area. Now, one thing that I see people do all the time is instead of okay, if you have an edge and you want a consistent feather on your brush, well, then you don't want to change your brush size, right? Because I've already painted here. Let's say I paint up along here. All right, so I've got a certain feather, which is making a certain softness to the edge. So okay. So are there more people still in the waiting room? Sorry, I just need to check this. Yes, admit, and then come back. Okay, so instead of changing it, I'll actually paint too far into the pear with the same edge, right? And then I can just hold down the Option key. Oop. Sorry if that was really loud. I apologize. There we go. I can just hold down the Option key or the Alt key, get the same size brush, and then paint back in those areas that I want, right? So that can just help if you don't want to change the actual size or the edge of the brush, especially if you're going around an area that you want. Okay, so I've got this area subtracted, and I could then move on and start subtracting this whole area right here, but I'm going to actually do that with a second brush, so that if in case like you were working for an art director and they wanted to have these two components be separate, it'd be easier and more flexible if I do it in this manner. So I'm going to say subtract again. I'm going to use brush. I'm going to get a much larger brush. I'm going to get a larger feather on the brush, and I'm going to decrease the flow so that I can slowly build up the adjustment. So now as I start painting here, it's going to start removing it from the areas that I paint, right? But it's going to do so more slowly because I have that flow set down. All right, so I might just want to remove it from this area. And then I'm also going to change the exposure. I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit. All right, so all of these are all non-destructive, so I can go back in and change them at any time. But let's look at the mask panel. So now I have the mask for the object. That was the artificial intelligent mask that was automatically created for me. I have this brush mask where I subtracted the stem, and now I have this other softer mask, which is subtracting the color from the bottom of the pear. And when you hover your cursor over the mask itself at the top, we can actually see that mask. And I go, oh no, look, I've missed some areas at the bottom of the pear. I might want to fix that. So in order to fix that, all I need to do is come back, select that brush again, and then come in and let's go ahead and just increase the flow 100% and just paint right down there to make sure that I've removed it at 100% at the bottom of the pear. We hover our cursor over again and I've fixed that mask. All right, so that's what I mean by multiple components, right? We've got the first component, we subtract the second, and we subtract the third, and we end up with our result. That's what I wish was in Photoshop, but for now, this is great. Why is it so great? Because you can work on them independently of one another, and you can reposition them, all right, which we'll look at in just a moment. Okay, so I've got my pear, my single pear targeted. Let's say now I want to select something else. Like I don't really like the blue tint that's in that napkin. So let's add another object select. Just drag that marquee around that area. It will automatically select it. If it's missing an area, which I can see it is right over here in that shadow area, this time I'll add with the brush. get a smaller brush and just boop, add that area in right here. Sorry, add with the brush and add that in, being careful not to go over the pear. And then we can go ahead and in the color area here, I can desaturate that. All right, and I might go in and just also take down either the highlights a little bit or maybe the whites. Or again, I can do this as two separate masks. There's really no drawback from using multiple masks. So if I wanted to, I could just say, okay, well, this is desat the napkin, right? But if I want to maybe bring down the highlight, and maybe I only want to bring down the highlight in this area. Maybe I don't want to darken this or the area near the edge. What I could do is I could say, all right, let's create another new mask for the napkin. Go to Objects, select the napkin, bring down the whites or the highlights, whatever you want to do, but I want to hide it from this area, right? So let's hide it. Here's my mask. It's got the object, but I want to subtract maybe with a linear gradient, and I'll drag up into the napkin. So now if we look at the components, the whole napkin was selected. Then I'm saying, don't affect this area, subtract that area. And now the only area that it's affecting is this area. And like I mentioned, we can move and reposition any of the components. Well, not all of the components, because the components that are the AI ML, so the masks that are automatically made for you, you can't like move those because they're based on AI, but you can move like the brush, the linear gradient, the radial gradient, not a problem whatsoever, independently. So now we are only affecting that area. Okay, and I'll do one last thing with this image before we move on, and that is I just want to lighten up. I kind of want to put like a light in the background along this area here. So I'm going to select the brush and I'm going to zoom out. So I'll use command minus to zoom out. And I'm going to start with a smaller brush. I want the flow all the way up. I'm going to put the feather all the way up so it's nice and feathered. And I'll start in the upper left and I'll just click once. All right, that sets down a point. And for example, if you want to draw a straight line, you can click, keep the mouse down, hold the shift key and drag, and that will draw a straight line. If you click once and then hold the shift key down and then click again, Lightroom will connect the two dots and you can change the size of the brush between the two dots. So if I wanted to, I could make it really small, hold down the shift key and click, and you can see it went from large to small. Let me undo that. And this time I'm going to make it larger, hold down the shift key and click, and you can see that it went from, well, it was already kind of big, but it did get larger. And now we can make our adjustment. So I can say, let's say we increase the exposure there, but of course the light is falling onto the pears and I don't want that, and also falling down here onto the wood. So to easily subtract the pears, well, we know that the pears we can select with select subject. So I'm going to choose subtract and then select subject. So that takes away the pears. I'll choose subtract again, use my brush, get a smaller brush, and then just start painting down here until I subtract this wooden area from there. And again, I can just click on the pin if I wanted to reposition this within the image area. All right. And you'll notice the pins are showing for all of my other masks. That might seem distracting, in which case you can come down here and tell it to not show. So undo the show unselected mask pins. But there's a benefit to having them show. And that is, instead of having to go and find the masks on the mask panel, especially if you don't name your masks, it can be difficult because you click on one and toggle the visibility. Oh no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Well, you can just click on the pin and it will select the correct mask for you. So that's kind of an advantage of having the pins show up at all the time, is that you don't have to go all the way back to your masks panel and actually select the mask you want. Okay, so if we just toggle the visibility of all the masks, there it is before, there it is after, so quite a difference. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, if we go to, for example, this center pair, if we decide at this point, gosh, I've just kind of overdone that whole adjustment, If you've got a bunch of sliders that you've moved and you don't want to go refine each one of the sliders, up at the very top, there's an amount slider. So I could just say, let's just back off on that whole adjustment. And it's going to back off on the exposure adjustment as well as the change that we made to the hue and any other sliders that you had made. Or we could say, you know what, I just want to boost that a little. Let's really amplify that. So you could move it over to the right and that would increase the amount of all of the sliders that you had changed. Okay, all right, let's move to the next image because there's a few additional masks I want to show you. One of them being select sky. So I can click on select sky here and Lightroom Classic will automatically select the sky. I'm going to make a little change with dehaze. We'll just increase that. But dehaze always increases the saturation. And it's supposed to do that because it was really built to either decrease or increase the amount of haze. And it's based on like atmospheric perspective, and it's trying to actually see through particles in the atmosphere. Well, most of the time on a foggy day or on a smoggy day, you don't see a lot of saturation in those areas. So it's boosting the saturation. But with the sky, to me, it looks really fake. So I'm just going to decrease the overall amount of saturation there, right? And the reason I use dehaze is because dehaze, it makes very little change in your highlight areas. It's really changing the shadow areas, the blacks and the shadows in your image, which is what I want to change, the darker values in the blue sky. Now, I could have used HSL and made a global adjustment, right? So I could have gone here and made it global, but if there were any other blue values in the image, it would also affect those blue values. So that's why I wanted to do it as a selective adjustment. Plus, it automatically selected the sky for me. But another caution when you're using dehaze, if you use it like as much as I did at 46, and we click to zoom in here, you may notice, let me zoom a little bit more than that. What's it set to? Yeah, let's go into 100%. You may notice that it has increased the appearance of the noise. So I might also go down here to the noise area. And this one's a little weird because moving it to the right is counterintuitive, but it's not really noise, it's noise reduction. It's just, we couldn't fit noise reduction in that small area. So it's just noise. Moving it to the right will reduce the amount of noise. And it might be difficult to see over Zoom, but it is reducing the noise here so that it looks a little bit more even with, say, the areas in the shadows that I have actually brought up globally. So, all right, let's go ahead and zoom back out. I want to do a few other things. I'd like to get rid of some of the saturation in the foreground. So I'm going to click the plus icon again. I'll use the brush and I'll just do a quick kind of paint job over here. Let's just paint over this whole area, get a larger brush and just paint over this. But I did paint over, you know, this one area right here. Now with the paintbrush, you probably know, it also has the eraser. So I don't need to click on subtract with a paintbrush. I can just switch over to the eraser and then I can come in here and just say, hey, you know what? I don't want to affect this area. So let's just remove that. And usually, you know, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll make just kind of the outline, right? I'll make the outline and then I'll show that overlay and I'll go to that white on black because that makes it really easy for me to just come in and fill this in, right? So I could just fill in that area and let's see if I now hide that and go back to color overlay. Oh, I went a little too far there, but all right, I'm not gonna worry about it because I could spend all day doing that. Plus, I think this overlaps actually, this one right here. Okay, so you'll go in and you will make much more delicate masks than I am, but for right now, that's good. I don't want it to affect that area. Not sure if it got this area right there. So let's go back to my brush and let's, oh, sorry, I must not have hit it. Let's go to brush A, there we go, and make sure that's colored. Okay, then I'll just go in here with saturation and desaturate it. But I don't know if you noticed or not, there's actually quite a bit of red in this rock area here. And when I desaturate it, then I'm losing all the red in that area as well. So one of the things I can do is I can say, okay, I drew this whole big brush area, right? That's my mask. And whatever I do is going to happen to that whole masked area. But then I can say, wait, I don't want you to affect a certain color range or a certain luminosity range. So I'm going to choose subtract, and I'm going to choose a color range that gives me an eyedropper. And then I can click in that red area here, and it will subtract the red color range from that brushed area so that I'm really only affecting the yellows. And if I zoom out, we can see that now I've got a little bit of that red back in my image. Now I think I've taken the saturation too far, so I'll add a little bit of color back in there, but you can see how useful that would be. All right. We can also, I'm really surprised with the object selection because I thought it'd have to be like a pretty obvious thing, like a tree or a bush or a person or something super obvious. But with these hoodoos, it's amazing what it will select. So let's say I just want to make all of these darker. I can go to objects. I've got my rectangle, drag it around them, and it's going to select all of those objects. And of course, if it doesn't select one of them, like it didn't select this one, I can say, hey, let's add more objects. And then I can drag it around there and it will select that object as well, right? So I would suggest this. The stacking order matters with your masks and you can't move them. So I would suggest that you select all of your objects and then at the top, you would either, add, like if I have to add something, then I would use the add to add a brush, or I would use the subtract to subtract something, as opposed to if you select one object and then use the brush, say, to refine it by adding or subtracting, then you select another object, you're going to have to add another brush because the brush was sandwiched between those two objects. So I'm going to select all my objects first. Then if I needed to subtract something with the brush, see, I would put that on top of the other two objects so that I could come in here and subtract, say, this area right here and this area. And if I needed to subtract from this, I could, because it is on top of the layer or of the other mask. Oh, and it missed this whole area. So wait, so let's also do an add with a brush, and we can add this as well. A little bit smaller of a brush there. There we go. Okay, so I think that's everything I want to adjust. Maybe a little bit more there. And then let's just take down the exposure. And a lot of times I notice that when I have to move the exposure or the tone settings, I also need to make just a slight change in the color temperature. So I'm just going to warm that up a little bit and maybe even add a slight amount of tint to make it a little bit pinker, just to kind of separate it. So anyway, in just a few, in a few minutes, and I'm sure you could do this faster on your own, we've gone from before to after, which I think makes a very big difference in an image like this. All right, so you'd probably spend a little more time with the masks, but I wanted to make sure that we saw all of those options. Oh, one last thing before I move on from masks, I want to go to this image. So this image already has some masks. So if we toggle it off, there's before and there's after. So we can see I've got a darken the foreground. So this just darkens that foreground kind of area right down at the bottom. I've got one that just brightens the whites in order to they're a little muddy in the original image, brightens them, gives it a little bit more depth to the image. And then I've got this other mask, which makes these rocks a little bit pinker, to be honest, and just kind of separates them from the background. But the problem with this one was actually the sky. So this is the actual color. Like if I do before and after, oh no, it's not. Oh yeah, because this isn't really the before image. So when I made all these changes, I've got this color sky, which I think looks terrible. Or maybe it was actually a result of changing the white balance. No, the white balance is as shot. So let's just make sure I don't have something with HSL. No, okay, so that is the original. All right, so I do not like that color whatsoever for the sky. But when I created a sky mask, you would think this would be super easy. But I actually think that the sky masking actually does a better job when it's a more complicated sky, like if you've got trees and leaves and clouds and all those things. Because what sometimes happens is if I go ahead and decrease the saturation here and maybe darken it down a bit, and then we zoom in, okay, it's doing a really nice job. But sometimes what'll happen is you will actually get like this fuzzy area. All right, I'm gonna make this really dramatic, but you get this little fuzzy area right here, and it will start showing up as a halo, all right? So sometimes what I will do instead, I will go ahead and delete this, okay? And I would use a linear gradient. Now, when I create a new linear gradient and I drag it down in this area, right? And I take out the saturation and I start darkening this down. Of course, it's also going to darken down the top of the mountain. And that might be a little bit too much. I want a little bit of blue in there, but it's darkening down the mountain. And the problem is if the adjustment is also affecting the mountain, then obviously I don't want that. So what I want is within this linear gradient mask, I only want it to affect the blues. I don't want it to affect any of the other mountain area, but I can't add it because it's already including the blues. I can't subtract it because that would do the opposite to get rid of the blues. What I need to do is I need to intersect the two masks. So I hold down the Option key on Mac or Alt key on Windows, or you can use the three dots, right? And you can say intersect the mask with, and then I'm going to use that color range again, right? And then I'm just going to click and drag. So you don't have to do a point sample. You can do a point sample. You can hold down the Shift key and do up to 5 points, or you can click and drag with the marquee, especially if because skies will change over the length or the height of the sky. And so sometimes this will actually get me a better mask because when I zoom in, we can see that I can choose to refine the mask and I can actually move the edge of the mask here. And as I refine it over to the right, it's selecting more and more of those blues. And sometimes I don't get that halo that I might have gotten when I was using the Select Sky automated selection tool. All right, so that's just one hint. And then we haven't talked about the luminance range masking. So in this image right here, I just want to bring my highlights down and bring my shadows up for this image. And we're going to zoom in and I'm going to try, I might even zoom into 200% since we're on Zoom. You can see in the shadow area here, hopefully, that there's a lot of noise. And that's because I moved those shadows way up, right? Like as I move the shadows up, it's going to amplify the noise in those darker areas of the original exposure. So if I ever want to mask this, if I ever want to do like noise suppression just in a range of luminosity values, I can move back to my masking, choose the luminance range, and then it gives me an eyedropper, just like the color range did, and I can click and drag in those dark areas of the image. And what I get is this interface that I can then adjust. So I can define what areas exactly based on luminance that I want to adjust. So the areas within that rectangle are going to be fully adjusted. And then the areas between the rectangle and this next vertical line, those are going to be slowly faded. So it's a fade range. So they'll be fully affected and then less, less, less. So if I scoot this over, all right, oh, let me undo that. If I scoot this over, the fade range will be longer and we can see it starts creeping into my midtones and even into my highlights. If I move this over, now my midtones are going to be fully affected. So I've grown the area that's completely affected and then I've kind of shrunk that area that has the fade range in it. But I just want to affect the darker values with a little bit of a fade range, and we'll come down here and we'll go to noise and I'll increase the noise reduction. And you can see if I go too far, hopefully on Zoom, you can see this is now too smooth because it's smoothing out this area. Well, it's too much. Plus you can see the difference between the areas that are affected and the areas that aren't. So I just need to back off on that a little bit. So I get a little bit of noise in this area that kind of matches the noise in my midtones and highlights, but it really has reduced the shadow areas. So if we just hide that, right? So there was the noise normally, and there it is with it reduced, but just in those darker values using the luminance mask. Okay, moving on to people, because we have a lot to cover. Oh my gosh, it's 7:37. Okay, we have to do this one quickly because I have to move on to Photoshop. People, so Lightroom will help you adjust people. So it automatically identifies the person in the image. You can click on it And then you can make a mask for the entire person, or you can go in and just do like the face and the body skin. You could create one mask for those or two masks. You can enable all of these different masks, and then you can just hit create mask and it will create all the masks for you. So then you can go in and be like, all right, well, the person, so this is for mask one, this is the person, the face skin. You might say, oh, well, hey, I'd really like to get rid of a little bit of texture in my face. So I could decrease that, and let's zoom into maybe 50%. We certainly don't need 200% there. Okay, 50%, and we can see, right? So the texture, moving it to the left, is gonna just make it look like I got a little bit better night's skin, or sleep, or I didn't spend so much time in the sun as a kid. Now, when I go to mask 2, that is the body skin, right? So I might want to do the same thing where I move the texture over, but I might also want to darken that down, right? So now we get a little bit more differentiation between the face and the neck, which is kind of nice. We have eyebrows. I don't know what you want to do to the eyebrows. If you want to, you can just delete a mask if you don't want to use it. We've got eye sclera, so I could just increase the exposures a bit, and we can zoom in again. So that's just the whites of the eyes. We can go here to the iris and pupil, maybe make a little bit of a lighter exposure, maybe a little dehazed to darken the dark values. That's just going to help make me look a little bit more awake. We've got lip, so you could change the lip color if you want to. I don't know, we could make this maybe a little more purple. Okay, that's fine. Go into the teeth. We could lighten those up, desaturate them, whatever it is you want to do to the teeth. And then we have the hair. So we could also, let's bring up the exposure on that. Let's desaturate the hair. Let's go really gray, but it's gone a little too bright in some areas. So just like any of the other masks, right? We can come in here and we can say, well, let's just subtract with the brush, and let's just subtract this area and that area. And now it's only affecting this area. So that quickly, we've gone from kind of before to after. Now, the best part about this is that all of these masks, I mean, you know that you can copy and paste, or you could, if you had a bunch of images that you needed to adjust, you could actually enable auto sync. And when you make an adjustment to one image, it would make an adjustment to all the images. Really cool. You could, after you adjust one, you could select copy, and look at, here's all of our masking. So you could copy all of those masks. All right, so I'll copy them. I can go to the next image, which is different. The crop's different, I'm different, right? And I can hit paste, and it will paste those masks. But the thing is, all those AI masks will be recalculated for this image, right? So they all match. So the face changed, but it's reselecting the other skin, the eyes, right? The lips. If there weren't any teeth, it wouldn't be able to select them, but there are. The hair, it's gone and selected the braid because it's recalculating it and then making those adjustments. Now with the hair, I might need to be careful because I did do a manual mask, right? This brush mask. So it looks like that actually needs to be changed. I need to just drag that up a little bit, or, you know, you could delete it and then redraw it, but just be cautious of that because it's not an AI mask, right? It was a manual mask that I made. So great stuff. And you know what I did is I just took my first image, added all these masks, put some default settings in there, and I save that as a preset, right? So I have a basic people enhancements preset. So if I go to this next image, instead of having to go over here and click on the person, select the masks, and do all that, I can just go to my preset, and it's an adaptive preset because it has that AI mask. So it will just add all those masks for me. And then I can go in, oh, and see, look, this one, it didn't find any teeth because my mouth's shut. So it just puts a little warning icon right there. And I could just delete that if I wanted to. In fact, there's a new option, I believe, to delete all empty masks as well. So you can do that. Okay, so that's adaptive presets. There's some default adaptive presets that ship. There's portrait and sky. So if we roll over on this image, we can look at the different sky presets. You can make your own presets and save them out just like any other presets. Okay, whew. Let's go to one other big change in Lightroom Classic, and then I'll move to Photoshop, and that is the change that we made to the healing brush, which I think is huge, right? So in the past, before these new masks, the AI masks, and before this new healing, everything in Lightroom Classic and Camera Raw was based on sets of instructions. So all of the adjustments were parametric, not pixel based, but with these new masks, as well as these new healing options, we've actually introduced pixels under the hood in Lightroom Classic and Adobe Camera Raw because it has to make up information. So let me show you. So there's still the clone and there's still the heal options, but there's also the content aware remove options right now. And these options will work better depending on your image, right? So for example, if I just want to get rid of this little spot right here, let's go back into 200% here. I could probably get away with just using the clone tool, right? A small brush, click on that. Oh, it didn't do a very good job. Let's see where it's selecting from. Oh, right here with the clone tool. So it's selecting from here. So we can go ahead and we can reposition this anywhere we want. We can actually, if I delete that and I hold down the command key, we can actually click and drag this, right? So I could go directly to another area and select that area directly instead of having Lightroom try to figure that out. So that's quite handy. So the clone tool works okay. If I wanted a little bit softer edge, maybe I go here to the little Band-Aid icon. But the problem with the Band-Aid icon is that sometimes you get some color bleeding. But let's go back to the clone tool for a minute. So let's also get rid of whatever's in this window right here. So I'm just gonna move my cursor over this and let's see what it does. Oh, I didn't get the center point. So that is not gonna do a good job. So let's delete that. And this time I'll be a little more careful when I drag this out. All right, and let's see what it does. Okay, well, that's fine if I want to like board up the window, but I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna reposition this right over here to the good window and just fit that right in. All right, so if I hide the edges, it's doing a really good job. Nice that I had that other window right there. I could switch this to see if it does a better job blending the edges. Got a little dark, but actually it might look better just because it looks a little bit different. All right, but if I use either of those two tools over here, I think we might have a problem because, like I mentioned, it blends. Yeah, see, it's blending this edge. Now I can hit refresh and have it automatically select a different area, or we could try selecting another area right over here, but see, I still get that blending. So when I switch to the new tool, it's not going to give me that blending, which is really great. And it also, because it's making up pixels to fill in this, right? It's content aware. So it's looking around it and it's filling in those areas. It's also not going to give me a source area. Like I can't realign the source area. There's no physical area to realign, but you can hit refresh and you can also hold down the command key and click and drag around an area. Now it's probably really hard to see because it was hard for me to see the cursor. If I wanted to click and drag around this area, I'm telling it, I'm forcing it to take information from that area, which in this case is silly. I really want it from the area that looks similar. Okay, but you can actually do quite a lot. Now this is a bit extreme, but let's say I wanted to get rid of these steps. I mean, I think as the photographer, I should just walk over there and remove the steps. But anyway, that's not the point. Point is I can go ahead and select these. When I release the cursor, it's like, no, it's going somewhere else. And I can hit refresh a bunch of times, but still, no. So what I do is hold down the command key again and just say, hey, can you just take from this rock area? And it does. So I can still see in this one, there's a lot of repeating areas, but you can also click and drag, like you could paint over another area to get it to redo that area if you wanted to. And if I hide the edge, I can actually paint on top of an area that's already been filled and it will just recalculate that area. So that might be helpful as well. All right, and probably we should take away this pipe, making sure that it also takes away the shadow. I think you get the idea. It's making up pixels for the first time and actually filling in those areas of your image. Toggle on and off the visibility, on and off. One other hint, if you tap the A key, that's going to turn on these visualized spots. And if there were any dust spots like in the sky, we would be able to see those dust spots. So evidently I had a clean sensor at this point. Okay, with that, we need to switch over to Photoshop before we are out of time. So I want to show you at least 3 or 4 things here in Photoshop. I'm going to open up this image right here. I'll use Command E in order to open this. And in this image actually has, first of all, this is the smallest thing, but This is new to the latest update. It's going to change. It's great. I use command 0, which is fit in window, right? But when I fit this in the window, do you notice now it leaves just this tiny smidge of a border around it? I have wanted this for so long because it gives me confidence. Like, I'm looking at my entire image. I know it's a small thing, but I fought for that for so long. It's huge. I love it. So grateful for the engineers. So they did that. But I want to talk about the object selection tool. Now, there is select subject. Select subject is great if you have one subject in your image, even if it's like a person or something, because it will go and try to find not only hair, but the face and the clothing and all that. So it works really well if there's one subject. But if you want to kind of drill down and you want to actually start looking for, somebody has their, let me try to mute people. Oh, meeting chat. Let me see if that works or not. Mute. Okay, I think I just did it. If I messed up, Einar will tell me. Okay, so with this object selection tool right here, there is an object finder. Now it's going to be a little slow right now because I am using Zoom, but what it does is it tries to find all of the objects in my image. Oh, let me go ahead and go here. And it's not done yet, but you can see when I position my cursor over each one of these objects, these lines, it will find it for me, right? And it gives me this pink outline. Now, if you hate the pink outline, not a problem. You can go to the gear icon and then you can change not only the color of it, so you could put something a little bit like, maybe not as crazy. We could just go classic. What is that? Oh, a little black outline. That might be helpful, or a white outline, whatever you want. In this case, I'll just leave it to, I think it's fuchsia, because the reason that it is set to fuchsia is because very few photographs actually have fuchsia in them. And so that's the color we chose because you can see it on the majority of photographs. Okay, so once you've got this magenta overlay and you change the color and outline and opacity the way you like it, then all you need to do is click in order to make that object a selection. And of course, there's all the normal, add to, subtract from, and intersect selection icons that you can use. Or if I wanted to add to it, we could just use Shift, or we could use Option to subtract, or we could use Shift and Option to intersect the selections. But I can go ahead and select all of these different objects right here. All right. And then you can do whatever it is you want. Now, you may have noticed, or you may not like that, which is, I totally get it. And the object finder works well, but did you notice like it didn't quite select this area right here? So you might, depending on what's in your image, you might want to, instead of using object finder, you might want to say, hey, well, what about using this mode, this rectangle mode? So you can use rectangle or lasso, very similar to Camera Raw, right? Or Lightroom Classic. And now I can just drag a rectangle over all of those objects. And not only did it select all those objects, it also selected that small area there. Now it also selected this. So I'd probably switch to the lasso tool and hold down the Option key. And of course you can start anywhere, right? You could start anywhere over here, but the important thing is you just want to make that line and then it would subtract that, okay? All right, if I go back to the object selection tool, we could also use the lasso and to do kind of the same thing. Now, there are 2 layers here, right? I've got the lime on the right and then this. So if I wanted to sample across layers, I would enable sample all layers. And then we could draw a lasso around here. And when I release, it would shrink wrap to that layer. Now, I don't know why it's not doing a really great job there. Let's go with the rectangle and see if we can get it to do a better job. That's interesting. I'm not sure what the lasso found, but anyway, just kind of a good point. You might want to try all the different tools and see if you can't get a better selection with a different tool. So I like the rectangle in this case and sampling all layers. Oh, if you simply want to see all of the objects that it can find, you can turn on Object Finder again, and then this little checkerboard icon right here will show you all the objects. Oh, that's so weird. I don't know what these objects are. Do you? I've got limes in the sky. Okay, well, good. I'm glad we're recording this. Einar, I'm gonna have to report. This is a little, that's so weird. What is that? Object Finder. Huh. Who knows? Okay. That's never done that before. I'm not sure what's going on there. So anyway, another thing that you can do is you can actually tell Photoshop to make masks for all of the objects that it finds, right? So I just want to roll over this. Let me just close this for a second. Don't save it, and let's open it again. And let's run Object Finder. Because that, yeah, see, it's not finding them now. That was something really weird. I don't know what was going on there. Okay, so as I was saying, you can tell it to find all of the objects and actually mask them. So if I go under the layer menu, I can say mask all objects, and in the layers panel, what it's going to do is it's going to create a mask and a layer group for all of the different objects. So here, if we look at this mask right here, I can option click. I don't know what that mask is. It's behaving very weird for me right now. Because I was on the lime on the right layer. That's why. Don't you hate that when it's your own fault, not the program's fault? I was so quick to blame. I want to be on the bowl of limes, go to layer, and then mask all objects. And let's see what it does here. Because I should be getting them for the limes. Yeah, there they are. So here they all are for all the different limes, as well as like for the leaf and for the bowl and for the foreground. So after it makes all of these masks for me, then I could do something like maybe add an adjustment layer, right? So I could come in here to hue saturation, and if I wanted to change the color of the bowl, I could do that. All right, so there's saturation, no big deal, but we can change the color. Let's do that. Now, again, I see that it has missed this one area right here. So again, I would just take my lasso tool, and I need to add this to the selection. So I'll just drag around there. And then I'm not going to change the mask for the hue and saturation. I'm going to go up to the mask for the bowl of limes, right? Because we can see that that area is black and it shouldn't be. I just need to fill that with white. So I'll use Option Delete in order to fill with my foreground color, and that takes care of that. And I can also go in and make this a little bit softer of an edge if I want to, by just adding a feather on the mask using the properties panel. And that will be a non-destructive feather that I can add. So I can go back and change that. Say, for example, if I had an object on its own layer and I was changing the size of it or something and I needed to change that. Okay, let's move on to, let's go back to Lightroom Classic. Oh, I want to show you a neural filter because we're always working on these. I'm going to use Command E to open this. I'm going to edit the original. And I want to use two neural filters for hand coloring images. One's going to restore the photo, and then one is going to add color to it. And I probably want to do this as a smart object. And I definitely, if I'm going to add color to it, it can't be a black and white image, right? So I need to switch this because it is in grayscale right now. So if I were to go to the filters and neural filters, it wouldn't let me add color because it's a grayscale image. So I'm going to go to image mode, and then I'm going to switch this to RGB color. Once it's in RGB color, then I can go to filter, neural filters. If I want to do it non-destructively though, what should I do? I should convert it to a smart filter, or a smart object, so it becomes a smart filter. I can either do it beforehand, or with the neural filters, I can actually choose to output this to a smart filter and do it kind of after the fact. So if you forget and you're already in here, you can just choose a different output. Now, I'm going to choose photo restoration. We can see it's still in beta. If it was the first time I was selecting this, I would have a cloud icon right here, and I would actually need to download the machine learning model that it uses in order to do all of its calculations. But for right now, I've already used it, so I can just toggle it on. See, some of these actually have cloud icons. I would need to download the machine learning model. Some of them actually, like I think it's Smart Portrait. It actually needs to be connected to the internet because it's going to do its processing because it's very intensive. It actually does it in the cloud. All right, but with photo restoration, it does it locally. You just have to download the ML model, and we can see it has improved. If we toggle before and after, there's before and there's after. All right, so let's zoom in and scroll up here. There's three different options. Well, actually, there's a lot more. So if you needed to do noise reduction, color noise reduction, halftone artifacts, so if this was a scan of something that had been printed, or a JPEG that had been highly compressed, we also have these adjustments. But for right now, I'll stick to photo, enhance face, and scratch reduction. So I'm going to apply only 2 of these to start with, the photo enhancement and the scratch reduction. And that's because sometimes I think the enhanced face, like I want it to enhance the eyes and the nose and the lips, but I don't necessarily want it to enhance the skin on the face, because I notice sometimes there's a difference between the skin on the face and the skin on like the arms or the legs in an image. So I'm going to work around this by turning off the enhanced face, but I'll increase the photo enhancement. See, if I move it all the way over to the right, it gets really smooth, I think too smooth. So I'm just gonna back that off a little bit. And I'm also going to use the scratch reduction. Now, when I use the scratch reduction, let's see, it's doing a good job. Let me zoom. Oh, it's still processing. Usually it's a little faster than this, but because I'm also, sending this on Zoom, it's a little bit slower. Okay, so I think they've improved the ML model because it used to subtract some of this parasol. So it's doing a good job. So let's zoom out. And it got rid of all the scratches down here. Again, there's before and there's after. But it also got rid of a little bit of stuff in her dress, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and apply this without the enhanced face. All right, so I'm gonna apply it as a smart filter without the enhanced face. All right, so there it is. And then we can use the mask here for the smart filter. And I can just, well, I'll just guess for now. I'll just grab my brush and I need to paint with black. So I'll tap X to exchange it. And I think it's like right along here is that little piece of lace. Okay, so I can erase that. Then, you could go in and fix anything else that you didn't want it to adjust. But here's why I didn't apply the face, because I'm going to make a duplicate. I'm going to use Command J, and then we don't need this filter, so I can take it off, right? So I use Command J, that duplicated the layer, which you can see as a smart object. And now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to add the neural filter again. And this time I'm going to add the face. And the reason that I'm doing it this way, and I will put my other adjustments to the same settings. Actually, I probably didn't need to get rid of, I could have just duplicated the layer and then edited the contents of the filter, and that would have given me the exact same settings, but that's okay. I'm gonna guess at this point that I was somewhere near 50 and 50. And if we go Command 1 and zoom in and we look at the face, it's actually making up pixels, right? So it's not using like someone else's eyes, it's actually creating those from scratch. So I'm gonna go ahead and enhance it like 100%. But again, see, the skin is just too smooth in comparison to the amount of noise in the background. Plus, it didn't quite get all of the hair, right? And there's no way for me to manually override that. So I might actually, say, oh, maybe I'm not satisfied with the results, or maybe I am. But when I apply this, and then I am back in Photoshop. That was weird. I don't know why it did that, why it zoomed to that weird location. But now see how smooth the skin is? Yeah, it looks weird. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill the entire smart filter mask with black in order to hide it. We can still see underneath the adjustment that's, no, you know what, let's not fill the whole thing because it has all the other adjustments on it as well. Let's just come in here and let's just hide it using black as a mask from, say, the skin area here, and maybe from the hair. And you can see I've got my brush is only set to 50%, so it's not hiding it completely. But this way I can come in and use a little bit of a smaller mask, and I can get a little bit of the noise back into the face so that it's not as jarring, right? So I could go all the way over here and here, and then actually tap the X key, paint with white, get a little small brush, and maybe just fill in the lips and the nostrils. So I think, I've obviously overdone it here. Her eyes look too good for the rest of the image, but I think you get the idea, and I wanted to make sure that you could see it over Zoom. I could always just go in and double click on the neural filters. That brings them up in neural filters. And then I could say, oh, you know what, that's just too much. Let's just back off on that a little bit. Again, it's going to take a minute to process on the device, but that's okay. Soon as it processes, I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to make another filter. All right, so I think that's fine for now. All right, so we backed off on that a little bit. That looks better. I'm gonna make one more dupe, right? Command J, take off the smart filter, because this time I'm going to go to filter, neural filters, but I'm going to use the colorize option. So right here under colorize, I will enable that. And then we can zoom out. So it's doing an okay job. I'd like to make a few fixes to this. You can see I've got auto color image turned on. There's a bunch of different kind of profiles you can use. You know, if you wanted to, you could see what retro denim looks like. It just shifts the colors for you. For now, I'll leave that set to none, but you can also do some color balance in here and reduce some color or noise reduction. And we can output this as a new color layer, which is what I'm going to do. I want this to output it to its own color layer, just like this. But first, I want to make some changes. So up here where it says manually color the image, if, for example, I don't like the blue that's in the tree in the image, I can just click in the preview here and say, no, you know what, that should be like a green color. And then it will create that swatch and it will fix that for me, right? And likewise, I could say, oh, I don't like this area down here. It shouldn't be green, it should be brown. So we can click there. That would then click the color. That brings up the color picker. And I can say, no, that should be like a brown color. And then it would fill that in. You can also just hold down the option key if you want to and drag this over to the other side if you wanted to fill all of this with brown. I might put another point right here on the leg, change that, not quite that yellow, maybe a little bit less saturated. All right. And then again, hold down the option key in order to bring it over to the other leg and colorize that. Okay. And then we can come down here and say, let's output as a color layer, hit OK. And now we have this color layer. So I don't need that layer. And here we have our color. And if I see anything that I don't like, ooh, like this, I don't know what that is right there. I could just come in here and with a brush, you know, we can alter this layer, or you know, you can go in and do this however you want. If you wanted to, you could select this area right here and let's pick a color for my foreground. Let's pick this brown that's similar to right there. And then we could just create a new solid color fill layer, right? That would fill it with that brown, hit okay. And we could just say, hey, let's go ahead and set that to color mode and it would change that color. And then you can go in here and, you know, you could change the color to anything you wanted. I'll just decrease that a little bit and maybe make it a little more yellow. All right, so any way you want, but I think, you know, similar to the object selection tool, anything that will get me like 90% of the way done very quickly, I like that. So I would probably start with this and then go in and refine it from there. All right, I'm gonna take 10 more minutes and then we'll go for questions because I wanna do two last quick things. I'm gonna open up both of these images. All right. So I know some of you might not be photographers, right? You might be designers. And so I just wanted to just at least touch on two more features. One is creation and the other is collaboration. So I've got this image right here and I want to, let's say, make an entire, maybe a postcard, whatever. I'm trying to make a design out of it. And what I want is I want an illustration of Mono Lake here. And I also want it only on one side, not the other. So I'd like to fill one side with a pattern and I want to make the illustration, I want to have a gradient overlay. And I also want to set the text from this other file that I have. So in order to do this, what I want to do is I want to extract all of those elements from this image. And the libraries panel actually makes this very easy, which is crazy that it's in the libraries panel because no one finds it. So I'm going to hit create new library and we'll call this Mono Lake. Okay. And I'm going to hit create. And at the bottom of the libraries panel, there's a plus icon. And this is how, so the libraries panel, if you've never used it, is a great way to store assets, especially if you have to collaborate with other people. So it'll store things like color swatches, logos, so graphics, brushes, the type, character attributes, all sorts of things, all right? So I want to go ahead and extract from image, and that brings up this window. And in this window, again, it might take a little bit of time because it is going to save to my libraries panel when I start doing these things. And so it has to save to cloud, save to libraries panel. Great thing about that is I can access Photoshop on any computer. And as long as I'm signed in with my own Adobe ID, I can access all of the assets in the libraries panel. So patterns, we can make patterns. That's the first option. We have a bunch of different options for the different kinds of patterns. We can reposition the little area that's going to make a pattern of in the image or preview area right here. We can scale that up or down and then reposition it. We can even rotate it if we want to, which is rotating this right here, not the actual image, and then make whatever pattern. So let's say, oh, we like this pattern. When I hit save to CC Libraries, it's going to actually save it to my libraries panel, and we'll see it appear in a minute as soon as it goes up to the cloud and comes back down. Oh, it's already there. I just had it covered. All right, then we have shapes. So we can make a vector illustration out of this photograph, and we can decide how much detail we want in the illustration. If I decide I want this much detail, but then I don't like these little clouds, there's a little eraser right here that I can use in order to get rid of those. I could invert it, I can smooth it on save, and then I can save this to the CC libraries. I would normally smooth it on save. It makes a little bit nicer of a drawing, but it takes a little bit longer. So for now, I'll just leave that off. It'll pick a color theme for you. So if I want to make sure, oh, I've got this dark color and I've got this light color here, maybe I don't need a black, maybe I want kind of this white area here, or maybe I need kind of more of this golden color, it will go ahead and save those to my library. I can choose a gradient. If I want to pick a gradient, let's increase the number of stops. So here's 5 stops, and maybe I want it to go from, let's say, a light color to a light blue, to a dark blue, to a light green, and then maybe to a dark green or dark brown. So now I've got my gradient extracted exactly from this image. I save it to my libraries. And there's a new feature here that we just introduced, which is type. So, well, this image doesn't have any text in it, but you can click on this plus icon and load any image in here. So I have this image of Furnace Creek, and I kind of liked this text right here, this auto service. So I'm just going to drag this around that text. And then I'm going to say find similar fonts, and it will go out and it will look for similar fonts in the cloud, like from the Adobe type library. And then I can just go through, and even if I don't have it installed, if I think, oh my gosh, I really like this one, or maybe I really like this one, I can save that to the CC libraries, and Photoshop behind the scenes will download that font and install it locally on this machine. Okay, so when I'm done, I'll hit close. And then I've got this other document that just has the text in it to save some time. And what I want to do is, well, first let's add the pattern. So there's the pattern. It comes as a pattern fill layer, a little large. So we can just double click on that. And maybe I want to scale this down to like 10%. Okay, that's a good pattern. You can change the angle, you can reposition it, you can do whatever you want. At this point, I'm going to show my ruler and just bring this over to 50%. Oh, and by the way, you can now right click on a ruler. Let's see if I grab my move tool and right click on that ruler. So you can clear your guides. I should also be able to, change the, no, that's going to set the custom color back here. Come on, guide. Oh, sorry, my fault. I have to select the guide first, then I can edit the selected guides. And here I can go in and I can change the color for guides. So you could change the color for all your guides previously, but now you can go in and you can change them on a per document basis and on a per guide basis, which can be really helpful for people who are drawing in perspective and stuff and have a lot of guides, or who are just laying out things. All right, so now I'm just going to use my marquee tool, and let's select the left side here. And I just want to hide that from the pattern. So I'm just going to fill that area with black, and that will hide it. Okay, then I want my illustration. So I'm going to drag out my illustration. It drags it out. I'm going to transform that. Let's just make it a smidge smaller and bring it down to the bottom and put it below that pattern fill, right? So it hides it over there on the right-hand side. And then I want to add a gradient to that. So we have this gradient here. So when I click on it, it adds it as a gradient fill layer, right? And I can adjust that. So I could change the angle of it if I wanted to. We could scale it to like 25%, and then I could scoot it over so it makes a faster, change in the gradient. I can change it. Let's change that to 90. So it goes down to up, and maybe 50% and reposition it again. So anyway, totally flexible. Of course, if I wanted to make a change to the color stops, we could do that as well. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave it like that. And then this text that I had in the document, if I want to change that really quickly, we can just click on the character styles here that we saved, and then maybe grab the type tool, right? And we have the type targeted, so we could just make that a little bit larger as well. And then, you know, whatever, if you wanted to move it over, well, we need to change the stacking order, but we could move that over to the other side or reposition it wherever you want. So really cool features in there that, you know, so few people realize that they're there. Actually, you know what? I don't like that text color. So I can just click on one of these colors too if I wanted to change the color. All right, well, obviously you guys will be doing the designing. I will just be doing the photo editing. All right, let's go back to that blue. All right, that looks good. Okay, so a lot of folks, when you do, you know, designs, you have to work with other people. So I just want to show this little share button before I wrap up. So share right here. We can invite to edit, which we've had before. Invite to edit, you have to save the file to the cloud, and then you can invite someone else to edit, and they can actually make edits to your image. But a lot of times you just want to share your image and get comments. So you can now use this share for review. And under the hood, what Photoshop's doing is it's actually creating a PDF, and it's going to take that PDF and it's going to share it with the person. And whoever you give the link to, and let's go ahead and create the link, they can make comments and annotations to your image. So let's see if we can quickly do this. And you'll notice, like, I don't have to flatten my image. I don't have to export to a JPEG or anything like that. I can just invite people. So I'll invite me as a tester. I'll invite this to view. So it sends me an invitation, and I'm going to get that in my email. All right. So if I just hold on a second and go to my email over here and sync my email, there it is. So now in my email, I can come over here and I can hit review. And when I choose review, it's going to open this up and I get this interface, and I don't have to be a Creative Cloud. I don't have to sign in or anything. You just see I'm not signed in, but I can add a comment. I can place a pin, you know, right here and just say, you know, could you change this? Love the font. Okay. Whatever, right? And then I would submit that. So I'm not me right now. I'm the art director, right? I hit submit. It says, oh, do you want to continue as a guest or sign in? I'll just put my name in here. Dun, dun, dun. Just Julieanne, and continue as guest. And then I can do that. So there's the comment, right? So now I'm Julieanne again. I'm not the art director. And I go back to Photoshop, and we can close this. And I can go to my comments, and the comments actually feed right inside of Photoshop, which is awesome. So now I could go ahead and I can update this. I could reply to it, and the person would get the reply. I could delete this. And when I want to, I can go ahead and share a new version of this as well. So I could go in and I could say, all right, let's share this. And it says, do you want to update the content? So after I make my fixes, I can just choose update the content, and boom, it goes right back to that person. So again, I don't need to export a JPEG, go to my email, attach the link and all those things. It will just automatically update it. Okay, so it is now 8:16. So I know I was speaking quickly, so I want to give you a little bit of reassurance before I start looking at questions. And that is, look at on my blog, which is just jkost.com, jkost.com. If you want more information about these topics, or if there was something that you didn't understand, or if like you're really new to masking, there's a lot of information here. So if we just scroll down, we can see like using the object selection tool, that looks familiar. How to use clone heal and content aware, that looks familiar. Oh, look at this. Shortcuts for Lightroom Classic, or extracting shapes, or colorizing, or everything you need to know about masking Camera Raw if you're a Camera Raw user and not a Lightroom user. Or what about compositing? There's new compositing videos up there too. So lots of stuff, but for now, I'm going to stop sharing and see if Einar is still there, and maybe turn on the comments. Hello. How are you?
So If you have questions for Julieanne, can you write in the chat? You see the chat, Julieanne?
I do see the chat. Oh, but I don't see
Yeah.
a lot of questions.
So if you could write in the chat in English, it would be easiest, I think, to write a short question to Julieanne.
Yes, I can send the link to my blog right now. I can go over here, copy, and type my message. Wait, why does it say direct? I don't want direct message. I'm going to send it to everyone. There it is. You are welcome.
Come on, no more questions?
Then it's a wrap.
Well,
Either it was really good or terrible.
Is this the shy Icelandic attendees?
Hopefully I did not overwhelm you.
You know, you're definitely not in the US, because they will be hands up and asking all kinds of questions. But you are shy. Come on, please. Anyone more questions? No. It doesn't look like that, Julieanne. Do we need? Is there anything else we want to then? I think if we don't have more questions, we will call it a day. I like to, if I can take over.
Yes, how do I do that? I
do that. I have claimed now that I'm a host, and there you have my final slide. I'd like to thank you, everyone, for attending this. I hope you enjoyed it. It will be recorded, and I will send everyone who signed up, because there are a lot of people who couldn't attend the live event. I will send everyone a link to the recording. Give me 1, 2, 3 days, and you will have the links. And Julieanne, once again, it's been tremendous.
Well, thank you very much for letting me take an hour or plus of your time. I really appreciate it, and happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah. Are you free on a quick chat on Messenger after this finishes?
Sure.
Yeah. So, okay. Do. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Happy Christmas. Gleðileg jól. And if you like to sign up to our email list, you can see on our homepage, you can sign up, and we will have another webinar in January, and we try to do this as regularly through the year. And then you're on our email list, and you get the emails about it. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.